Before we get to the approval of the minutes, I'd like to recognize our new commission member, Clarice Hall Black. She is here. Welcome. You want to say anything? I don't know much about Clarice other than I know she's retired Air Force.
Yes, I'm Clarice Hall Black. I'm native from here. I'm married. I have 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I retired from the Air Force in 2016. My husband retired in 2004. We moved back here to raise our kids, and now I'm doing this to help out. And that's pretty much it.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
This is the only time you'll ever be clapped. As long as you're on this, you'll be, from now on, it's going to be boos, just as long as you know that. Next item on the agenda, I'd like, commissioners, y'all have had the minutes from the July 2nd meeting. Are there any, well?
We didn't have the minutes.
Excuse
Where
me.
were the minutes?
They're not in there. We will bring the minutes up on the next month. All right, first item on the agenda, public hearing to consider SE Civil Engineering LLC for plat approval of Garner Subdivision, a 3-lot minor subdivision. The project is located on the northeast corner of the intersection of South Church and Burgundy.
Thank you,
Nancy?
Mr. Chairman. The property is approximately 1.6 acres in size. The largest lot is approximately 15,355 square feet, and the smallest is 14,670 square feet. There is not much to this. This is a basic 3-lot subdivision. There were a couple items that we had that the Public Works Director requested that they provide a 5-foot dedicated right-of-way. And we have that as a condition of approval, although I think they updated the plat and they have that on there now. The applicant indicates the owners of the land are going to build a new house on the lot that has the majority of the trees. They've lived in the existing residence for a long time, and they do intend on saving the trees that are located on that lot. It's got a lot of nice trees. And then there are 4 conditions of approval. Again, some of which have been met, but the first one is they're requesting plat approval be extended from 60 days to 180 days. This will give applicant time to take the necessary steps to remove the demolished house. And so they've requested an extension of that 60-day recording period. And sidewalks shall be in at the time of home construction on the subject property. The existing sidewalk shall be brought into ADA compliance at the time of home construction. And the discussion of the 5-foot dedicated right-of-way.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Would anybody here like to make a presentation on behalf of the developer?
Yes, my name's Larry Smith. I'm the civil engineer for the project. I think Nancy summarized it fairly well. The only other one item that I want to bring up, and I don't know if it needs to be brought into the minutes, is if possible on lot number 1, we would like the ability to do I'm going to call it a circular drive that would access both roads. And there we say we're limited to 1 curb cut. I briefly spoke with Mr. Johnson ahead of time. I think he would be acceptable to that versus, I'll let him speak for himself though. That'd be the only other condition I would like to have is the ability to do a circular one-way drive that would access both roads if that's an option. Other than that, it's going to be a 3-lot subdivision. All the setbacks will meet the zoning minimum requirements. The size of the lots will meet the minimum lot sizes. Utilities are in the area, and we've got aid to construction notes for bringing services to those when the lots are developed.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing.
Wait. You said you want a circular drive to access both streets on lot 1?
Lot 1, yes.
Why on your plat is there a notation that there's only driveway have only 1 access point?
That's what I'm asking, if that we
You
can.
want to change that?
Correct.
Okay, I got it.
I had a question about
Yes.
that too. Is the plan for it to be an outboard circular driveway along the perimeter, or are you talking about just cutting,
Well, right now, there is no plan. We're just selling lots. We just want the ability to be able to do that.
Okay. was trying to picture how it would interact with the trees.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Larry.
Thanks.
This time I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Nobody wrote their name on our sign-up sheet, but this is a public hearing, so if you have anything to say about this 3-lot minor subdivision on the intersection of Church and Burgundy, now is your chance. In that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn the meeting back over to the commissioners. Richard, you were brought up in this. What is your feeling about the drive?
Well, and as a general practice, trying to eliminate the number of curb cuts to the minimum necessary, I would tell you that that the intersection of Burgundy and Church is relatively low volume, so this is not one of those to just really dig my heels in on. I know, for example, we've been looking at one that's out on Twin Beach in 13. That's a little bit different situation. Those roads are a lot higher volume, so as you know, the need to eliminate any unnecessary curb cuts becomes a little bit more of a safety concern there. And I don't have a problem lifting that requirement for that corner lot, with understanding that all driveways have to be permitted anyway through the right-of-way permit at time of home construction, and that we can look at the geometry and all those aspects at that time. So this one, I don't have a real heartburn with giving a concession on that.
Thank you, Richard.
They do have it noted on the plat, so that will need to come off.
Commissioners, any concerns or questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
I've got a motion to approve the staff recommendation. Do I have a second? Second. A second from Ralph. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, moving on, the second item on the agenda is SD 1829. This will be a discussion regarding the request of Mullins LLC for a 491-lot village subdivision on Highway 104, just west of the intersection of Highway 104 and Lawrence Road.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is a request for a village subdivision. And Chairman, Commissioners, I'll unfold the details here, but what I would like to state very briefly as we begin is that there is no request for consideration of the subdivision requested at this meeting. It remains, and after reviewing the application with the applicant and their engineering firm, they worked with staff and agreed that we would leave it on the agenda as a subdivision case, but present it, discuss it with the commission, hear the commission's feedback, but not open a public hearing at this time. So we are looking at the Northgate Village subdivision project. These are the project details of the subdivision. You will also see that it was originally presented as a subdivision known as Sagefield. It is very likely going to be presented at submission time as Northgate. This would be located on State Highway 104, 1/8 mile east of Highway 181. Smart Living LLC would be the developer of the village subdivision. The current property owner is Verandas LLC. What this would involve is the property containing Phase 1 and Phase 3 of the Verandas would be conveyed to a new developer, potentially. There would be a reconciliation, possibly by a minor subdivision or some other conveyance that would separate the project, and effectively it would remove 99 lots from the Verandas, and we would consider a new development. Mullins LLC is the engineering firm representing the potential new developer. The acreage of the property in question here would be 174 acres, and you'll see in the maps that we'll get to momentarily, this is on the west side of the wetland buffer, or the wetland area that's a part of Verandas. This would be 482 lots. I'll call your attention that there is a typo in your packet where it was referring to 491 lots. The current site plan we will consider, or we will review today, is 482 lots. That gives a density of 2.77 units per acre. This would remain unzoned in the Fairhope extraterritorial jurisdiction. It is also not zoned by Baldwin County. The comprehensive plan does contemplate a future village node at the intersection of Highway 181 and Highway 104. And we'll note very briefly right here that this presents an opportunity for some density transition, which is contemplated by the comprehensive plan. The slide we have here, and it's in your packet, and I apologize for the size because of the size of the development. And so you can see what would be created, and I'll have a future slide that'll explain how this correlates to verandas. But you notice the area, the upper left-hand corner is the existing three-circle church property. So this would be east of the church as well as south and southeast of the church. The wooded area you see there is an existing wetland area, and on the east side of that is the Verandas Village subdivision. And here we just have a brief diagram to better explain the location. And you'll notice we created a rough dividing line in the center of the master property. And you see that dividing line on the far right-hand side. And again, that represents roughly the existing verandas on the east, the potential new development on the west. Here we have an aerial photograph better illuminating the existing overall site. So the aerial photograph on your left shows the entire site, including all of Verandas. Verandas Phase 2 is on the east side of the wetland area. That area, and that phase currently have final plat approval. The other phase adjoining Phase 2 is Phase 4. It has preliminary plat approval, as does Phases 1 and 3. And also, fitting on this same page, we included an excerpt of the comprehensive plan showing the contemplated village node by the comprehensive plan in the same area at Highway 181, 104. You don't have this in your packet. This was something that we discussed at the staff level today, but we wanted to add to the slideshow to try to help describe it a bit better. The drawing on the left, if you'll look on your screens, it depicts, and you'll see again on the east side of the wetland area, you see Phase 2 and 4 of Verandas, Phase 1 and 3 of Verandas that have preliminary plat only. And then we compared that side by side with the drawing we looked at earlier. So we'll go through the specific details, and for this commission's benefit, let's refresh everyone about the village subdivision process. The village subdivision process is in Article 4, Section F of the subdivision regulations. This is very similar in process to that of a planned unit development. However, the criteria is completely within the subdivision regulations. I did have an error, there is an error in wording in your packet that references the zoning ordinance. That is incorrect. This is strictly within the subdivision regulations. Final approval authority is by the Planning Commission. The City Council would not consider this application or an application of this type. And as we talked about earlier, the subject property is located in unzoned City of Fairhope, ETJ. The zoning ordinance would not be applicable. So the applicant wishes to present the village subdivision case to the Planning Commission for the Commission's review and comments, but does not wish to open a public hearing. The applicant will make a recommendation, but I'll go ahead and state it here, that the request is for this case to appear on the agenda but be tabled, and tabled beyond 30 days to allow the case to return for consideration on September 6th or the beyond. From a mundane practical standpoint, it would be 31 days if it appeared for consideration on the September 6th meeting. This would allow them to bring it September 6th or a future meeting. And so the village subdivision process, you'll notice here, and what we did here is we just simply removed from the subdivision regulations for the Commission's benefit where it's derived, and as we talked about earlier, from Article 4, Section F1, and describes the purpose, and I certainly won't read off the slides to you, and this is in your packet, of course. It describes the various criteria for having a village subdivision. I think the most important thing here to understand is that this does require, prior to preliminary plat process. That process would be the same as with any subdivision, but this does contemplate and require a site plan approval as a step in advance of the preliminary plats, and that site plan governs, and again, very similar to the way a PUD operates. And Commissioners and Chairman, you do not have this, the next two slides are not in your packet, and for the sake of space, we figured we would just share it here. This is the detailed list of criteria by which the site plan of this type of village subdivision is evaluated. It mirrors a typical subdivision in many ways. There are a couple things I'd like to illuminate for you. Some of the requirements that are in bold on your screen, the classification and mixture of proposed buildings on the site plan, that is a bit above and beyond what you'd normally see. The architectural features, including building elevations, exterior material, roof pitches, building classifications within the site plan, again, a bit above and beyond what you would typically see. The size, location, sufficient dimensions of all buildings and improvements within the site plan, their size and relationship to the proposed and existing streets, lot lines, and so forth. Again, that's a bit more involved than a typical subdivision. This is the last page of criteria. Most of this, again, mirrors the subdivision process. I'll call your attention to items R and S. R is in Romeo, a comprehensive narrative statement describing the proposed uses of all land, structures, and improvements, and explaining the function and operation of the site plan as a whole. And then item S, additional data as the commission requires. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll call your attention to this, is that the applicant was able to produce an early draft of that narrative, and we did furnish that and place that in the Dropbox folders. That occurred very, very late in the process. Some of you may not have had the opportunity to see it, but they did share it and did want us to share it with the commission when it became available. This chart right here, and this is in your packet, this is a proposed development schedule, and it breaks down the phases. This would occur in 6 phases as presented currently. Beginning in 2019, concluding in February of 2029, so approximately 10 years. You'll notice in your far right column, we describe the number of lots and the lot widths. The exact lot dimensions we do not have at this time. Those are still under development by the developer, but you can get an idea of the various lot sizes based upon the lot widths. And so you see each phase is broken down from as wide as 92 feet to 80 feet to as narrow as 50 feet. So, Chairman, Commissioners, we have the following staff recommendation with one bit of background. As we talked about earlier, there are 2 names of the development as we have reviewed them. Some references are to Sage Field. However, the likely name that will be formally submitted would be Northgate. They were agreeable to changing the name since we have a Sedgefield in Fairhope currently. So therefore, for today's meeting and today's action, our staff recommendation is the case number be tabled for study. Table it beyond 30 days to allow consideration on September 6th or beyond, as we talked about earlier. And then just as a reminder, there's no consideration requested today other than tabling. And the applicant's not requesting the public hearing be initiated, but does welcome the commission's questions and the commission's feedback. And Chairman, Commissioners, there are 4 more slides prepared by the applicant, but before we turn it over to the applicant's engineering firm, I'm happy to answer any questions from the staff.
Questions? All right, thank you, Buford.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Joe Rector and Mr. Micah Jones with Mullins LLC are here, and I'll turn the podium over to them. And gentlemen, just point it toward the PC.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commission, thank you very much. My name is Joe Rector with Mullins LLC. I'd like to thank Buford. He's been very helpful in helping us navigate through this process thus far, and Mr. Dias as well. We've met with them, and they've given us some pointers, helping us keep us on the right track here. And we wanted the opportunity tonight to come and speak with you and talk a little bit about what we're proposing on this site, and then to get some feedback from you guys to see if we could implement some of those things, and then come back for a formal presentation next month, as Buford mentioned. A couple things I want to note is that although this that we're bringing before you is I think relatively new to most folks, this village subdivision process, it's not the first time that it has been done. In fact, this parcel, the current owner, Mr. Cordy, has brought this before the city before on this site and was approved previously for the slide that Buford showed, can I back this up? And this slide that shows the development that Mr. Cordy had approved previously in this process when he brought it before you in 2016 was to have a village subdivision on the entire parcel, and they showed the south half of the western portion of this as being future development. What we are doing in our development is taking the west half, and we're showing the full build-out for this parcel as what we are now calling Northgate Village subdivision. It is, as you can see here, located closely to the village center, which is not to be confused with the village subdivision. The village center is one of the stated objectives by the comprehensive plan to take these corners that have been identified throughout the area, one of them particularly being 104, 181 intersection, and create a village center there that has varying degrees of density and intensity spiraling out from that location, with the greater being at the intersection for something like commercial, and then you having higher density residential as you go steps beyond that until it gets to a lower density that is in between the next village center that would be, in this case, to the south. And so our development, what we've done is we've tried to mirror that same concept in this village plan to where we have taken a centralized park and we've created a boulevard of sorts around the perimeter of this, lined with the larger lots, and then you are able to come in off of those boulevard streets into these smaller streets that progressively go to smaller lots and create neighborhoods that are interconnected, but yet also all have their own identity. And we've done this with a layout to where we are clustering the development to protect the wetlands and not impact any of these. We have a row of lots here around the perimeter. They're large lots that overlook a natural wetland. And then as you come around to the west side, as we are near the adjacent landowners, we also have a larger lots around the edge and perimeter of that as well. And one of the things I'd like to also call your attention to is in the comprehensive plan, when it's discussing the goals of the contemplating a village subdivision plan, one of the things that it stresses is it talks about that the city should evaluate the density on a net basis and not look at the lot size as much. And so what we did is we've taken a look at this. If this were in the city or if it was part of the county zoning and you had an R1 on this, for example, that was low density residential, that density generally equates to about 2.9 units per acre. Our development that we're proposing here is below that 2.9 units per acre, is at a calculated density of 2.76 units per acre. So we're not asking for an increase in density on the site. It is really just a variation of the lot widths from the 92 to the 80 to the 50 in order to be able to get this village feel. And again, where you could take a typical subdivision and you would go in and just grid lots in there and have them all the same size and it just look cookie cutter, what we're hoping to have here is something that gives you a true variance as you progress through the development. And like we said, we have the park in the center that's a kind of a focal point, and we're hoping to have that as an amenity that brings everybody together, but then also it surrounded around the perimeter with a nice wetland and the lakes around the edges of it to give it just a nice village feel there, to where you have the amenities on the perimeter and the amenities in the middle that are all interconnected by ped trails and things, so that you can get people of the community to be able to get the full experience of the whole site. And the last thing I'd like to just mention here is that even though this is in the unzoned portion of the county and in your ETJ, it is not the only development in that area. And so whenever we were taking a look at compatibility, one of the challenges that you face sometimes whenever you're the first one is that the neighbors haven't been developed yet, so you don't have anything really to compare to. But if you take a look and you compare it to the future land use, that future land use, as we mentioned, has a village center there at that intersection that calls for this increased density in these locations. And then we also took a look at the area from our site about a mile to the west and a mile and a half to the south, and looked at the existing developments that were previous projects that were approved by the city, most of them being in the city limits and in the adjacent areas. And you can see by this map that you have on your screens there that's to the left, the compatible densities that exist on these various subdivisions. You have R1, R2, and then even to the south, R3 densities in this area here. So again, the uniqueness about us is the fact that we're not in the city and we are unzoned, but we are close to the continued growth in that direction. And it is a, as you can see in the map to the right, to where we're providing kind of a logical next step out that direction. So those are some of the key points that I just wanted to mention. And as he said, main thing is we're on a listening exercise here to take some feedback and to get your thoughts on some things. And I'd be glad to answer any questions or be able to specify anything else. And I hope you all got a chance to review the draft of our narrative. We go in depth with everything from the traffic to the compatibility, wetlands analysis, and everything like that on our report. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions?
Would you, I know I did not get to see that report, but would you go through just briefly what your traffic analysis looks like?
Okay.
Just in a nutshell?
In a nutshell.
And I say that because I don't live very far from this site. This is one of my
Okay.
main lines of travel on a regular basis, and I can tell you, in the mornings from about 7 to 9, trying to get through the intersection of 104 and 181 is a train wreck. And now we've got a high school there. We've got a motor coach hotel getting ready to open up on the north side of 104, a little further down 104. And I'm just real interested to know what your traffic analysis indicated needed to be done with 104.
Right. So, first thing I want to mention is that one of the slides that Buford brought up there was the build-out schedule. What this master plan, this village master plan, does in effect is set in motion a plan that will take place over 8 to 10 year period of time. An approval of the master plan is not going to result in 482 homes appearing on this property and everybody dealing with the aftermath of that at one particular point in time. This is a progressive, iterative process that will take place and unfold over an 8 to 10 year period of time. So our traffic study that we had performed by Neil Schaefer, they did an in-depth study over that period of time to show each phase as the progression took place as to what improvements would need to be made on 104, anything out, any potential additional connection points to 181 to alleviate traffic, and the ultimate build out of this in the 2028, 29 time period. Their recommendation was that at that point in time, either a signal would be needed out on 104 or an alternative connection point out to 181 to the west was what their recommendation was. And that would be at 480 lot build out. The steps before you get to that, the first phase, for example, where it's just the 26, 13, and 25 lots, that wouldn't necessitate that at that point in time. That would be basically a widening a right and left turn lane into the one entrance, because only one of the entrances would be developed at that point in time to be able to just serve that 60-something, 67 lots in that first phase. But as the development went through, it would go through the normal preliminary plat and engineering review process, and we would have to be able to demonstrate that traffic breakdown at each one of those phases. Then whenever that trigger was hit, that's whenever we would have to implement the next level of traffic improvements out there at that site.
Okay, but I guess my point is, certainly they wouldn't have to be looking at this in a vacuum to where they're looking at the individual phases and saying, well, up to a point, we're not gonna have to do anything, because it really doesn't apparently it doesn't factor unless they did the study the way they ought to have done it. The intersection, the interchange already, and the volume of traffic on 104, and then you've got Veranda that's the subdivision, I guess that's phase 1 and 2, over on the east side of the creek bottom. I mean, there are no houses in there yet we do have a high school.
But it does-
We do have a massive amount of traffic there.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, it's just real obvious, and even though this is in the county, certainly the county commission is gonna be one that's gonna have to be looking at infrastructure changes.
Right.
So something's got to give. And this is not the only intersection that we've got problems with in this immediate area. Highway 64 and 181 is in the exact same condition right now. But also, this is just one subdivision. And with what's occurring within the county right now, there are going to be others. So it's all got to be factored in.
Right, in the traffic study, we had a copy of that traffic study we provided. Did they get a chance to get that?
So, Chairman, Commissioners, as we talked about earlier, as soon as we received the traffic study, we uploaded that as well. I don't know if anyone had the opportunity to download it, but as we talked about during our work session, it will, everything in today's meeting will be conveyed to you again in a different file sharing method, so you will have it available. Everything you've seen today, you will have it available, including the traffic study, and also Mr. Rector's narrative that he's reading from as well.
And to answer more specifically any question about the traffic, I can have Micah Jones, who's our engineer, he can drill down if you have some specific questions on that traffic study. But we do have an in-depth traffic study that factors in all of the things that you mentioned that is provided in our package.
Yeah, that's right. Neil Schaefer added growth rates to the existing traffic volumes. So any growth that is proposed on that roadway is factored into that study. And the improvements on 104 were left and right turn lanes on both intersections and a traffic signal at 1. And then I'd have to go back and look and see if there was any level of service impact at the signal at 104 and 181. I don't recall exactly. I don't think the level of service was impacted there, but I think the signal at our intersection would have alleviated that. But I'll have to go back and check.
So you're saying that at some point in the future, you're thinking a signal will be at this subdivision?
Yes, that was the recommendation. And the level of service impact was actually not on 104, it was on our driveway. So that was the impacted, it was just too many people trying to go left. And they were just backing up within the subdivision, so that warranted the signal.
Kind of what happens at Circle One Church on a given Wednesday or Thursday night, whatever night it is that they have, and they've got the sheriff's department out there with about 4 or 5 vehicles every time one of their services lets out, because they can't get out either. And that's right now.
Sure, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the construction on 181 north of 104 is being let.
It has been.
Okay, so
is
it
what
will
now?
be improved.
What'd you say, Wayne?
The 181 road widening and 4-laning, that project has been let and will be underway.
Right. Oh, right.
I have a question, Wayne, real quick. Are we still set on our sunset clause? Have we come up with anything that we've been mentioning about guaranteeing 8 to 10 years out, planning?
I don't think, Buford, you want to answer that question, sunset clause for the village subdivision?
I know that that's something that we've brought up
Right.
several times
Right.
because this is an issue that we get into. We approve something 10 years down the road, they haven't started it, it gets started, and we're in a whole different ballgame of population, and
Right.
our infrastructure is not there, our traffic is not there, we've got more schools.
Right.
So I
Well,
would
the-
love to know
yeah, with the-
where we
with-
are on that.
Sure. With the preliminary plat, there is a sunset clause. You have to start construction within a certain period of time or it will expire. With the village subdivision, I'm not sure if there is a sunset clause in that.
And so Chairman, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
I didn't hear you, what'd
What
you
is
say?
that, Kim?
The initial
Go-
approval of a site plan, which is what the method by which you would approve a village subdivision, that approval stands for 6 months. The same regulation contemplates phasing, so you would have to start at least your first phase within that 6-month period.
And how long do you have to finish it?
It's not provided.
But in these, when the additional phases come, they're not grandfathered into prior water retention rules or, BMPs or what have you, so they are looked at again each time as they come back.
They'll have to come back for preliminary final plat.
Subdivisions will have to come back.
Phases. But as far as how long overall before
I just want to protect ourselves on what we approve, and then oh yeah, you approved that, now we're changing is this. I just want to make sure that we're smart on that.
But remember, it's a double-edged sword, because what we don't want is just phase one and then a big black area.
I
It's
don't know.
nice for them to show, what they're contemplating,
Right.
because we got onto the
And I would love to
Pinewood,
see
recently
more,
because they
like
came
the
in with
the
5 and
amenities that
then-
you're talking about, a much more visual of what you're going into. And I opened my Dropbox, and I use it every day, but I didn't have anything attached. So I
Well,
don't-
and, Mr. Chairman, to answer Ms. McKellar's question, we discussed having some type of a sunset clause for MOPs, because currently you can have an MOP approval and it does not expire. And the reason for that is because an MOP, as we discussed now ad nauseum, reflects only portions of the subdivision regulations, and that preliminary plat expiration is not included in that section of the MOPs. But in this case, like Mr. Watson was saying, you have a definite expiration on the master plan, on the site plan. Then all of the preliminary and final plat approvals are still conducted as normal as with any other subdivision, so that triggers the time restrictions and the expirations of your typical subdivision. So a lot of the data that we're presenting here today and that the engineers have furnished is actually supporting documents to the site plan approval. Technically, that's not required until you get to the preliminary plat stage, but however, they wisely felt compelled to add those as supporting documents to present this to the Planning Commission. So as soon we knew that for example, we knew that the comprehensive narrative and the traffic study were in progress, so therefore, as soon as they were furnished, we uploaded those. And as we discussed, we'll come up with a better file sharing system where you can see those large documents. We'll transfer that to a new system, and everything in this current case we'll upload to a new system where you can download and read those.
Question for you. You probably know this because you're a traffic engineer. Traffic engineers, when they do traffic studies, they do a model of what's going to happen, and that model keeps getting updated as new information comes in. Now, what I'd be concerned about if I was you, your property on the other side of 104 is also vacant and a pretty good-sized piece of property, okay? And they're also, within the models, the standards that the transportation people use specify how far apart traffic lights can be. In other words, they can't be too close together, or you get a hippity-hop pattern, you know about that. So you want to be double-checking that to see that you're not, put yourself in a position, you're assuming a traffic light is going to be there when that may not pan out. You want to stay with this. I keep hearing reference to the traffic study. That's like saying the tomorrow. I mean, you really have to stay on that as it goes along, or you may find yourself coming up short. Now, the second thing, I saw a reference in here somewhere, I can't find it, to an access point through the Circle Church, and I didn't understand exactly what that meant, and was that something that's going to be part of this plan, or?
So I can answer that question. Whenever this project was reviewed and approved previously, Mr. Cordy had, and he's going to come up in a moment, and he wants to say a few things as well, because he's got a history with the property and the previous village process. But it was a discussion with the church that they requested to have this alternate access point. And so in his previous plan, they had provided that access point, and we just honored that same request and showed the access point.
Now, is this access point going to be governed by some kind of a legally binding agreement that it doesn't go away at some point in the future?
Well, it will be a platted street right-of-way.
And Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, we do encourage connectivity. We think that's a good thing. The city has encouraged connectivity. Conference plan encourages connectivity, so we do encourage that. But what Joe said is it will be a publicly dedicated street.
I got to ask you this question, too. I'm looking at this site, you're going to have 104 is going to be 4 lanes. It's just a matter of time. It might be 2 years, 3 years down the road. You got 181 with 4 lanes. Why would you put a subdivision of single-family houses in there rather than something that might take advantage of the commercial location?
Because at this particular point in time, that's what the market is driving toward. I mean, that intersection, as the map previously showed us, was exactly as you mentioned. It was designated as a village center with commercial around that intersection. But as part of the definition of that village center, as you step away from that.
I didn't mean it had a front on the major highway. I thought maybe it could become the kernel, the center of the village development, something like a Whole Foods.
That this site could? I believe it's been for sale, and the Whole Foods hasn't put an offer on it yet.
Wayne,
But I understand what you're saying.
I would have
Yeah.
done it differently.
Wayne, is there a application in the process for the land across the street from this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with one. Nancy, Nancy Buford,
Is
have y'all
that-
talked to anybody about this property?
Is there a MOP that's application in the process across the street from this?
Just the RV part, anything else is outside of our
And
jurisdiction.
the RV park down 104 further.
Further on to
I'm
the
not,
east.
I've not.
What about on the Old Lemon property? Is that on
No,
the northeast intersection of Higby Road and 104?
Mr. Chairman.
That's coming for informal
Thank you,
review
Emily.
next month.
So that is how far to the east of this?
Across the street.
You look at your map and you're looking at
Yeah.
that intersection right there on the, where the veranda is. Right there at that road intersection, the northeast corner, you're looking at a little piece of it right there.
So in other words, we're going to have a MOP come up in the next 2 months across the street from this. And I'm just asking that not to throw any sand in the gears, but maybe we get the two together if we're looking and contemplating a light or a ingress egress with the traffic studies, so that we don't have one entrance and another
Yeah, they
entrance
can line
and
up,
some
right.
cluster. I think it would be good at this point, for the traffic engineers to know that a MOP's going across the street and this is going across the street. Then
Are
I
you
think
saying
it'd
the
be-
northeast corner of that intersection?
It's going to be the opposite
Yeah,
corner
that's-
of the intersection.
That's going to be, if you look at the image that's on the screen here, you would be,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, come on. Try. I'm not sure exactly where it is. I apologize, I didn't drive out
I don't know
there.
how to point to it, on this picture up there, the very, very top right, do you see that intersection right there? I don't know.
Okay, so it's not straight across then?
No, it's way over there.
Okay.
across
It's-
in the next
So
section.
it's,
They can't see the mouse pointer, I'm sorry.
but that intersection, well, in the very top right corner is Higby Road 104. There's an apartment complex being asked for
Right.
in that very northwest. So even if that gets approved or not, any access to 104 has nothing to do with access to here. It's completely,
Yeah, I just wanted to I wasn't sure exactly where that lined up. I didn't drive out there, and apologies for that since this wasn't
so that's.
formal.
So it's not right across the street.
Sure, thank you,
And
Trey.
Mr. Chairman, like Emily was saying earlier, the commission will see that case as an informal review during the September meeting. not for consideration strictly for informal review purposes, but that is the location of a possible MOP.
My one thought on this before it comes back, next month for us to have the public hearing and to discuss, just a few things I think you should look at. One is exactly what Ralph said, 104 is going to be 4-laned at some point. And I think it would make some sense to look at, what kind of buffering you have between, on the north side of your subdivision, between those houses and 104 for whenever that is going to happen, whether it's 2 years or 20 years. And the other thing is, we have the wetlands on the east side and the wetlands on the south side, and because of that, we haven't required much connectivity, because obviously there's no reason to have a stub out into a wetland. But with all of that given, I would really like you all to look at the stub outs very, very carefully on the west side, and number one, talk to Three Circles Church and see if that can continue to be made where people who go to the church and are members, a lot of church members probably like the idea of buying these lots. They wouldn't have to go out on 104 to get to the church. And then as far as the western connection that you have in Phase 6, and that can always be looked at later. It wouldn't be set in stone, but certainly I would think that try to look whether that needs to be moved north or south a little bit to where it makes sense. If there's a subdivision, in other words, to the west that's already finished out and has cul-de-sacs that was pre our connectivity requirements, it wouldn't make sense to have a stub out going right there. And I like to see a stub out, and again, we can discuss this at Phase 5, but I like to see a stub out to the south at some, where that cul-de-sac is. At some point, it would make sense to have a stub out there. One thing that our high-priced people that we've brought in and have done our comprehensive plans, numerous different advisory companies, Emily can attest to this, have said, is really, really stick to the connectivity. That is the most controversial thing that we do, because somebody always gets hurt by it, but that overall people are benefited by it. And so that's one thing, because of how large this is and because there's no connectivity basically to the east or south as it is, I would like to see in that cul-de-sac something to the south, and just make sure that west connectivity, makes sense where it is and isn't just, tit on a boar out there somewhere.
And as you mentioned, that's one of the things that this does is this gets us the density and kind of the proportion of lot configuration we're going to have, but because of the fact that we have 6 months, and it's one of the things you do have in your code that defines this, that the village subdivision site plan, you have 6 months to be able to submit your first preliminary plat. And then you have to keep that process going in order to keep this alive. And by the time we get there, it will be a few years down the road. So based on what the development that has occurred along 181 at that time, it will be things that we would consider at that point in time when those preliminary plats come in as to exactly where those connection points would make the most sense. So we're not going to just pick one today and say that's where it's going to be, because by the time we get there, it may make more sense, like you say, to move it up a few parcels or move it down.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your amenities of what you're proposing?
Yeah, so we have the large park area in the center. Buford has provided us with the city's parks and green space requirements. And what we're going to do, and for the official submittal, we'll bring in a detailed plan, a landscape plan to show kind of what we're proposing on that, so that we can have a clear picture of exactly what that is. Because right now it's in the preliminary planning stages of it and everything, but we will have a detailed plan of that we'll provide for you.
Okay, and just to touch on, I agree with Lee and Ralph. I think just an idea, I think this location is in special need of some commercial aspect to the front of this, just like a Rock Creek with 500 homes. You've got some kind of, maybe a restaurant, a cleaners, to that aspect. That's a progressive nature. That's what a lot of national developments this size, especially in this rural area that will not be rural soon, I would just look at that. I would utilize the unzonedness to be able to accommodate these buyers and the neighborhood residents.
Okay.
I'd definitely like to see some sidewalks connecting to the church, and then where whenever somebody does do something commercially on the corner, it could eventually be, pedestrian connectivity. Any other questions?
Mostly piggybacking on some of those comments about the possibility of exploring mixed use and the importance of connectivity, and I may have just missed this, but I wasn't clear in terms of the phasing, at what point those connections would be developed, and just looking at how many phases we have to go around before we get close to Circle Church, it would be nice to have some of the connections front-loaded. And as well as the amenities that maybe, and then based on our past experience, also to be very clear about the phasing in terms of stormwater and functionality. So this may be part of the additional information in Dropbox that I missed, but I'd like to be clear on that phasing.
Yes, and the way we have the phase lines developed right now are based on the stormwater considerations. The numbering of the phases is not etched in stone at this particular point in time. But the lines of the demarcation, that's broken up with those considerations that if that phase is built, that's able to support the stormwater is able to support that entire phase.
So just to clarify, when you get to phase 2, would you still just have one access road on 104?
If it were to go in the configuration you're looking at that particular, yes.
Okay. And then phase 3 would add the connections to the church, and
Yes.
that just seems like a lot of lots at that point through 2 with just one connection point.
We can take a look at that and see if it works better with phase 2 as phase 3 and phase 3 as phase 2. We can take a look at that.
Anything else? All right. Yes, sir, Richard.
And I do just want to add a couple of just points to consider. One, we did discuss, if you'll notice in phase 4, if you go down to the little section of the picture showing through, that's a reserve right of way, because that aligns with the road to the south. Unfortunately, there is a wetland between it, but one day that may need to be bridged so that there is a southern connection. So we have talked with them about anticipating the future there. But also understand the most important thing here is that 104 and even an eventual connection to 181 all are state roads, meaning that ultimately their connection and all improvements and all mitigations is going to come under the jurisdiction of ALDOT. It's not going to be us. I'm going to review the transportation study and make appropriate commentary on it, but ultimately ALDOT has have the comfort level with it. Of course, the project for the 181 widening is let. I understand they're going to be mobilizing this month or early next month. It is a 2-year build out, but basically about his timeline, when you start seeing rooftops coming there, hopefully that intersection is reconfigured and is functioning at a higher level. The scary part is that we've kind of learned that with ALDOT, by the time they get a project done, it's already antiquated because the capacity has already been consumed by all the development that's going on. And we know the 181 and 104 corridor is a very popular place for development.
Richard?
Yes.
Didn't ALDOT take over what used to be 27, which was the county highway, which is now 181? Didn't they take it over, and in exchange, they gave 104 to the county for county maintenance?
No, 104 is a state road still.
I thought that was the swap.
No, sir, that was 112.
Yeah, that's 112 in North Baldwin. 112 goes from Bay Minette
who
to
has
basically
104?
Escambia County.
I thought the county had 104 now.
No.
I'm pretty comfortable saying 104 is still state road, because I know I got a little bit involved on the turn lanes for the new Catholic high school, and that was all under ALDOT. So,
Okay, all right.
pretty comfortable
Yeah,
staying with that. So.
yeah, that's, I'm pretty sure that swap was for 112, which is on the other side of the county.
What a swap.
And I will reiterate, one of the things that we talked about in this preliminary discussion is that we've seen development slow down before, and that we said every phase had to be able to stand on its own. So if the first phase is built and something happens and there's no future phases, it can completely operate, meet green space requirements, meet drainage requirements, meet access requirements as a standalone phase by itself and not dependent upon future phases for that as well. So that's going to be a design consideration as they go through this process.
Well, one thing I can guarantee you, after being on this commission for 18-plus years, is when Phase 6 comes to us, it's not going to be this.
Oh, I
guarantee
think
you,
that's
I guarantee everybody on this commission, it's nice, and, you know, we get on to that, you know, one a couple months ago, because, you know, they came with 5 lots up front, the area in the back, and then all of a sudden they come up with the area in the back. Well, this is what we want, them to show us what they intend to do.
That's right.
But don't expect, I mean, times change, connectivity to the west and south will change, development around it will change, and, you know, there's certain economic conditions that maybe the 80-foot lots sell like hotcakes and they can't get rid of the 50-foot lots. I mean, look at the RSA project down there. I mean, they've taken all the apartments down and doing houses because they can sell them faster than they can build them. So you can pretty much be guaranteed that by the time you get to Phase 6, there'll be some changes, and it, you know, shouldn't hurt our feelings. Just whoever's on the P and Z at that time will have to look at it and see do those changes make sense for the community. All right, Trey, do you have something else to add before we move on to the next item? Talk fast.
The traffic, real quick, Art, I know it is ALDOT on 104 because we've already got our 3 permits for ALDOT on there for our existing subdivision. And the traffic study that I have not read, there's traffic study, but the traffic study we had before mentioned that when Highway 181 is completely finished with the 4 lanes, that intersection will not be at failure, you know, at that time. So ALDOT was comfortable going ahead and approving everything because when 181 is complete, that intersection will handle all the traffic from our subdivision plus the surrounding area at that time. So that consideration has been addressed. The other thing is their layout. Y'all haven't said much, you know, had a lot of concerns, but one of the things y'all hadn't noticed that I think, Joe, how many acres of green space you have? Open space?
We have 15%.
All right, y'all require 10%, you got 15%, so they've gone over and above a little bit. The north buffer over there along 181, you had somebody mention buffers, there's a 60-foot common space all the way across with sidewalks that go along 104 all the way to Lawrence Higbee Road right there, and within 10 of it, also those sidewalks going over to whoever develops the corner to the west.
Are you involved in that other development?
No, nope. I'm not involved in this one other than I'm the landowner. We have a contract to sell it if it gets approved. I'm selling the land and I'm out of it. But I do have the development to the east of the wetlands.
The Verandas.
The Verandas. That's still our custom home neighborhood there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the only other thing was the density closer to the node. I would hope that I think this layout is good. It mentions, you know, going from a dense at the corner with townhomes, apartments, commercial would be, and getting larger. This isn't for here, but I hope that as we go out towards this node that the small lots would not be allowed anymore, or townhomes or apartments. I guess that's up for later discussion, but I think they did a great job in keeping the dense, you know, towards the intersection there. That's all I got to say.
Trey, can you tell us anything about if it's a commercial, local builder? I'm not familiar with Smart Living LLC. I don't.
Well, they could, I mean, he represents the owner. He can tell you about who they are.
Okay.
They did Stone Creek Villas.
Yes.
Wasn't it Stone Creek
Okay.
Villas?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. We will see you, I guess, September 6th. It looks like that's the Monday after Labor Day, I guess.
Thursday?
Or is it?
Thursday.
It's on Thursday.
It's on a Thursday after Labor Day. Labor Day is Monday, so we'll meet the Thursday after that.
Good.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is public hearing to consider the request of SC Engineering for a multiple occupancy project approval of Reed Mixed Use Development, a 21-unit project.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
need to recuse myself, and I believe,
That's
unfortunately.
right, I do that, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, was that you that was listed on that?
Love this day.
And Chairman, Commissioners, we have both an MOP, multiple occupancy project, as well as a related site plan review for your consideration, and this is the Reed Mixed-Use Development. I'll describe the background relevant to both cases concurrently, then we'll pause to consider the MOP, then we'll reconvene with the site plan review. We'll begin with the basic background information related to the site, and the request is a 21-unit, multiple occupancy project. This is located in the Central Business District. The buildings are labeled, and you'll see in your plat in your package that there are 6 buildings, and they each have labeled by their proposed lot number. And so those numberings are 1, 1R, 2, 3, 4, and 5, totaling .081 acres. This is located at the intersection of Magnolia Avenue and Church Street, near the southwest corner of that area. You'll see 2 maps on the next slide. Judge Reed and Ms. Beverly Reed are the developers. Larry Smith with SE Civil is the engineer of record, and Ms. Rebecca Dunn Bryant is the architect of record. Lots 1 and 3 are mixed use, so therefore these are built to the edge of the right of way from the appropriate requirement of the zoning ordinance. And we'll have a unit breakdown for you on the next slide. Lots 1R, 4, and 5 are strictly residential, so therefore they do have a 20-foot front setback. And as we said, we'll have a unit breakdown on the next slide. There will be, assuming approval of the development, you'll have the existing lot lines will be adjusted via a common lot line movement to accommodate the development, but there's no new lots created. I apologize there. This is Zone B2. It is within the CBD. The engineer of record provided documentation that the trip generation does not warrant a traffic study. And we have a couple maps here for you to locate the property. And we have our zoning locator map on the left. We have our aerial photograph on the right. And you'll see that the subject property is outlined. There's additional area. You don't see this in your packet, but on this slide, we wanted to illuminate for you that Sachs Lane is a property owned by the Single Tax Corporation, and we're calling it out here, and especially on this slide right here, because Single Tax has authorized the developer to make improvements necessary to service the site. Those improvements can be made on Sachs Lane. You'll notice here also we give the proximity to the South Alabama campus as well as the existing Persian rug store there on the corner of Church and Magnolia. We can refer back to it, Chairman, Commissioners, if we need to. There is a detailed breakdown on this slide of the uses of the units per building, and we can refer back to that if we need to, if there are any questions. Here we have a site utility plan. And so we'll make some site-type notes associated more with the MOP. LID techniques are not enforced in the Central Business District, but there are drainage calculations strictly related to the pipe sizing. There are 3 drain inlets proposed connecting to an existing drain line on the right-of-way at the intersection of Magnolia and Church. Only stormwater infrastructure in the right-of-way will be maintained by the city. This does not include detention or retention systems, so that is not reflected in the MOP conditions of approval, which you see typically on MOPs. Overhead utilities, we relocated underground, coordinated with the electrical department, and also these are sprinkled buildings, so there are some fire hydrant considerations necessary to satisfy fire codes that all have been reflected in the plans. So, Chairman, Commissioners, we will, at this point, we will bring a recommendation before you regarding the MOP, the multiple occupancy project. So the subject application is an MOP. There is no plat to be submitted for final approval, and as we've seen several times with MOPs, procedurally that does dictate some conditions of approval. Many of these we've seen from many times before, the pre-construction conference where we discussed the sequencing and the closeout. But reiterating something we emphasize quite a bit is that each building must be a standalone, must be constructed and have all its improvements installed so that it can operate as a standalone. The submission of a replat for existing lot lines to be proposed for the proposed development. We talked about that earlier. That's an administrative approval, but it will be necessary to adjust some of the existing lot lines to match the development. And Chairman, Commissioners, the remaining MOP conditions approval are typical for an MOP. What I'd call your attention to there is that there's no retention or detention on this type of a site in the CBD, so those types of things are not reflected. Those types of things are not reflected in this application. Commissioners, Larry Smith is the engineer of record. He is with us. He's with us here today, and I'm happy to answer questions before we turn it over to Mr. Smith if he has any additional comments regarding the MOP portion of the project.
Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right, thank you very much, Buford. Larry, you like to make a presentation at this point?
Thank you. Again, my name's Larry Smith. I'm a civil engineer for the project. Buford did a wonderful job expressing the layout and how everything is working. As far as the mixed-use buildings, it is within the CBD, so we'll be expanding the existing sidewalk along Magnolia to an 8-foot sidewalk. We've pushed the buildings up along Magnolia, which is one of the requirements within CBD, but it also helped us. We have 3 very large, significant live oak trees, and being able to do that and push those buildings has given us a nice green space around those live oaks. We're designing the parking area to be a gravel area that will allow more stormwater to infiltrate to help replenish the water for those live oak trees. I've got a architectural elevation, because I believe it wasn't in your plans. If you want me to roll it out and show it to y'all, I can. But it shows you the view from Magnolia Avenue. What's that?
And Chairman, Commissioners, and Larry, I'm sorry for interrupting. The building elevations are in the slides for the site plan review portion, so we will see them very shortly.
Then
and Larry is welcome to forward through
It's
if
the
you'd
same.
like to.
It's the same. So if we can just wait for that, if you would like, unless y'all want it now. Other than that, I'm here for any questions that y'all might have or comments.
This is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and then may call you back up if any questions. This is a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open that at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to this project? Mixed-use project at Magnolia Avenue and Church Street. Yes, sir. If you don't mind, come up to the microphone and state your name and your address for our record, please.
Thank you, Lee. My name's Al Johnson. I live at 215 Magnolia, and I'm kind of crazy about what I'm fixing to say. I'm not opposed to what Jim and Beverly are doing, but I got some problems that I think that we need to know about. Mainly water, and it goes down to the blinking light. You know what I'm talking about, the Pittman property. When it rains, everything goes down that hill and winds up and I get flooded at 215. The city is working on it. We know it's a year away before they can do anything. So my question, with the water, what type roofs do we have? Are they flat roofs, shingle roof?
They vary. Some of them are flat, some of them.
And where's the water going?
It's all.
Mr. Johnson, I will have him come up because anything he says needs to be in the microphone. So any questions you have, I'll make a list of them. And in just a minute, they're going to come back with a site plan review that's going to show elevations of the buildings that'll actually show their roofs. But you're concerned about the water runoff coming down to
Oh, yeah. And traffic. Believe it or not, Magnolia is probably the busiest street in Fairhope other than Section Street and Fairhope Avenue, bar none. And where your driveways are coming in, at the top of that hill is the entrance, and then you're coming out closer to me at 215. I think there's gonna be a problem, but maybe not. That would be my concerns, but more so, I'm more concerned about the water.
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson, I'll ask the engineer both those questions.
Yeah.
When he comes up, and he'll put the answer on the record.
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
enough, that's it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Dan Stubler. I live at 209 Magnolia, across the street from this project. And it sounds really nice, and as such, my wife and I, we support it because I think that'll improve our property values. I think that part of it's really nice. We just have, my wife and I just have some concerns, and part of it is the driveway issue. Currently, the exit where these apartments are at now, the exit is right directly across from my house, and the way it's situated, and I don't know if it could be changed, the way it would be situated at the exit, especially the headlights from any car exiting that, will shine directly into my living room windows. And the way my house is constructed, that couldn't even go on into my bedroom. And so part of the charm of my house, I think it's one of the prettiest houses in Fairhope, is to leave the windows open and a little light on at night, and people walking by can look over there and say, ah, it's warm and inviting. You know, I'd hate just to have to close my blinds and make it look gloomy, okay? So I don't know if that could be moved a little east or west. It wouldn't take a lot to get that not going into my windows there, or even making it an entrance instead of an exit. I don't know if any of that's possible, but that would be really nice. And then I have a couple other concerns, real brief. You know, while this construction is going on, is there going to be, you know, Mr. Johnson mentioned the traffic on Magnolia Avenue. Is there going to be a place for the contractors to park besides right on Magnolia Avenue? When I pull out of there, it's going to be hard for me to see around a box truck, you know, or something like that. People racing down Magnolia Avenue. And so that part will be kind of concerning for me. And then I'd just like to know about how long this project is going to take, at beginning and ending date, just an idea of what's going on. Other than that, I think it's a great project, and it'll be a real benefit to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Stubler. Anybody else have any questions, concerns, or comments about this project? If not, Larry, I wrote down 5 questions. Water runoff, traffic, ingress, egress, staging, and the time frame for construction.
Lee, will you close the public hearing?
Yes, and I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Thank you.
I might have to get you to remind me of the
Okay.
4 afterwards, but I'll start with the stormwater runoff. Well, first off, as I said, we're going to use a lot of gravel. All the drive aisles, once we get up behind the buildings, is going to be gravel that will actually allow infiltration. We do have some under drains in there just in case it doesn't infiltrate fast enough to help remedy some of the runoff that's occurring within this development. If it makes it to the inlets, it will then enter the storm system. We are putting in a new storm system along Magnolia and tying into an existing inlet at the intersection of Magnolia.
Where does that water eventually go?
That water crosses Magnolia and heads down Church Street. And I'm not familiar with what Public Works is working on in that area. He had mentioned there was some improvements, but I'm not familiar with that.
And then they ask about the traffic and then the ingress, egress along with the traffic of people getting in and out. Headlights, et cetera.
Yeah. As far as the ingress and egress, I'd have to let my client speak to any potential reversing of the access. It potentially could be done. I don't think we can shift left or right. We've got 3 buildings right there, and we're property line here, property line there, and we're squeezing the drives between the 2. But as far as flow goes, I would need to double check on if there's a potential to reverse the flow. We also have Saks Lane that vehicles would be able to exit and go through Saks Lane. And I also want to note that the majority of the parking that's in the rear is going towards residential structures. It's not a commercial situation back there. We are trying to do what the comprehensive plan wants and have the buildings up front, hide the parking in the back. And so we have our ADA parking in the rear for the buildings, but then the rest of the majority of those parking spaces back there are going to serve those residential structures. What other?
What kind of time frame are you looking at, and has there been a plan for staging at this point yet?
Yeah, well, there's not a construction staging plan at this point yet. As the plan is to build one structure to start with, and then in our package that we submitted to the city, we had a phasing plan, and the numbers of those phases might change depending on which building's more economical to construct in the beginning, but the intent is just to build one structure as soon as we can get through the approval process, and if he has a comfort level to move forward on it. As far as the overall build-out, I'd have to, I don't know if Judge Reed has an overall timeline. It's all going to be market-driven, but if he does, I'll let him speak to that.
Are there any more questions for the engineer while he's up? All right, thank you very much, Larry. Any further questions for staff or anybody else? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I've got a motion, a second, to approve the staff recommendation. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. And one abstention. All right, next item on the agenda is a little bit of deja vu. Same thing, but this time we're looking at the site plan review. Buford?
And Chairman, Commissioners, we'll move on to the site plan review of the same project. And this, we'll see the building elevations toward the end, if you'll bear with me. We'll go through the site plan review topics on the next couple of slides. Wanted to state pretty emphatically here, this type of development is supported by the comprehensive plan. This is a new development of an older existing property. This would be an infill type of development. The architect of record provided an additional narrative, which much more eloquently than I explains how this development aids in the transition from the CBD to the adjacent residential areas, and it explains the benefits to the community, and we uploaded that into your package. The building height, the number of floors are allowable in the CBD. We examine the lighting, the lighting requirements on the site, which is a typical review item for site plan reviews. So we have the proper height of lighting poles as well as the light output. We talk a lot about screening on site plan reviews. So in this case, the HVAC units that are not screened by landscaping that are on ground level are RTUs, rooftop units, which would be screened by the parapet walls on the buildings in which they occur. We also examine the parking, which is in compliance with the zoning ordinance. So for example, in this case, on this development, we have 32%, but no more than 40% of the parking spaces are for compact cars. We wanted to note here, and Mr. Smith mentioned it earlier, LID techniques are not enforced in the CBD, but the pervious paving and completing the pervious paving that is furnished on this site, that's proposed on this site, would comply with the various ordinance regarding pervious paving and parking spaces. So this voluntarily approved that, and Mr. Smith explained the benefit to the trees that are being protected, and we'll explain that on this slide here. The horticulturalist reviewed and approved the landscaping plan. We talked about the green space requirements currently are not a component of the MOP regulations within the subdivision regulations. So that's not a component of this review. However, several heritage trees are preserved by the development, 3 42-inch oaks, 2 12-inch oaks, 1 40-inch oak tree, and 1 24-inch oak tree. That gives us approximately 49.9, let's say 50% of the subject property is landscaped, combined for the entire development. And as we mentioned earlier, that one of the conditions of approval of the MOP, which is becoming has become a standard requirement, is having a landscape as-built drawing as a condition of approval of the MOP. And so, Chairman, Commissioners, we have several elevations for you, and this is not in your packet. We apologize for that, but did want to have it on screen and for the benefit of those watching the meeting to at least be able to see the building elevations. What we see here is identified as Lot 1. the typical elevations. And Lot 2, and you notice that here where we have the hip roofs on this building. And Lot 3. And Lots 4, 5, and 6. Now, these are the residential buildings that are a component of this development. The 3, 2, and 1 are the mixed use. I inadvertently omitted Lot 1R, which also would fall on this slide, would have this type of building elevation. And so, Chairman, Commissioners, that brings us to a staff recommendation. We have a brief comment here, and the verbiage you see on this slide basically explains from where it's derived in the zoning ordinance that a site plan review is required and triggered by the conditions of this environment. And that brings us to staff recommends approval of the Reed Mixed Use Developments site plan review case. And we are happy to answer additional questions related to the site plan review.
Are there any elevators in these buildings?
I'll defer that to Mr. Smith.
There are places on the plans currently.
sorry?
There are places on the plans currently that if the build out of it needs an elevator, that one can
So
be.
there's a freight elevator, right?
No, it would be for people to utilize. But there is space allocation for an elevator in the layout.
Okay.
Emily, is this a public hearing? No, it is not. All right. Commissioners, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to you at this time. Any more questions for the engineer or the applicant who's here as well? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Okay.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Repeat me on it.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. And Emily put me as an abstention on that as well. All right, 5211 review for AT&T.
We've got, the next one's, I think, it's a PUD amendment. Is that right?
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay, there wasn't. Oh, okay, I got mine.
I'll be brief, though, Mr.
Upside
Chairman.
down.
I'll be brief.
Excuse me.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Old Ballads Village, I'm sorry. We have a PUD amendment for Old Ballads Village being requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is case number ZC 1806, Old Battles Village PUD amendment. As your report indicates, this property began development back in 2003. I think it was originally called Oak Hill PUD in 2003. It's been amended and taken on several stages of development, as the report indicates on page 3. The current request is to amend phase 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the Old Battles Village PD master plan. And as you can see from the photos, the current amendment is a request to include a self-contained area that's called the hamlet by the application. This hamlet is inward-facing lots. It is buffered on the outside by a 20-foot strip of buffer there. These lots all front internally. It does not front on any existing lots. There is green space to the south, an open space area that kind of separates these lots from the other parts of Phase 4. Again, the current lot total is 177. This amendment would increase that to 181. And I believe the total density for the total PUD would go from 2.04 to 2.09. I would point out that as you look around the city, the vast majority of the city is zone R2. Those lots are 10,500 square foot lots is what R2 requires, and that results in about 4.1 units per acre. So this is probably about half the density of the typical R2 lots like you would find in the majority of Fairhope. If you look at just the part that's being amended, the hamlet section, that represents about 3.14 units per acre. Again, below the typical R2 standards. We have looked at this with the compatibility analysis, and I believe the compatibility analysis would tell you that the allowable density using that analysis would be 2.76. This is well below that. And again, staff feels like that
This property has been buffered internally from the balance of the neighborhood. It's a slight increase in the number of lots, but also we feel like it's been mitigated from the compatibility standpoint. It's been mitigated by green space and buffers, as you can see from the screen and also in your packet. To the north is a 20-foot wide common area green belt that separates dissimilar lot sizes, and these are slightly dissimilar lot sizes. And also there's a 25-foot common area green belt that is south of the entrance to this particular area. And then again, a large common area that is wooded and would buffer properties to the south. The property immediately to the west is undeveloped, and it is unzoned in the county. Be glad to answer any questions. Staff does recommend approval. Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Is this a recommendation to city council?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Are you, public hearing?
I can go ahead and open if you don't have any questions.
I have just a quick question. With these buffering green belts, is there any requirements that, I was just thinking there's a very big difference if that's 25 feet of sod versus 25 feet of trees. Is there any clarification on what is in the green belt, or is there any requirement?
There is no requirement as far as what the plantings are. And I think right now it's flat land. There's no trees now.
I didn't know if they were planned.
And we can ask the applicant as far as vegetation, what they propose as far as vegetation there, because I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
But there is some separation there.
Thank you, Wayne. I'll go ahead and call the applicant up at this time. Thanks, Steve.
Good evening, Steve Pumphrey with Dewberry, and this is for Holly Holly. I couldn't get Steve Pumphrey representing Dewberry on here, but it's just too much information. And I told John this was going to be a problem.
I'm great with faces, I'm not good with names.
I can't live this down. These guys won't let me forget that. They call me Mr. Dewberry every time. So anyway,
Okay, Steve.
this has been an ongoing, and this is for our newest member, this has been an ongoing process with this development. I think that from the beginning when I got involved, this was an existing PUD. And we did do some moving around to move the amenity area further down and closer to the existing development, because Phase 1 was developed some years ago. And the amenity for them was not going to be done until much later in the development. So we started this out by moving the amenity area down. And as you know, the last time we were before you with this change, the problem with what we were doing then, we were still proposing the same product we're proposing here, but we had it down adjacent to an existing phase that already had homes under construction. And the residents, if you remember, were concerned about imposing this after they had bought their lots. Fair enough. The developer now took and went north of that common area that we have, green space we had, and moved it up away from where there's any development. We do have Phase 3 on our east side that has been built, but there are no homes there. So we'll be able to get this in prior to any, if it's approved, we'll get it in prior to any homes being built, so hopefully avoiding that problem. One correction to what Wayne said, Phases 3 and 4 are identical to what we had before. The only phases that are changing are 5 and 6. And just to be clear, the development as a whole does not change. The lot sizes of the remaining areas are identical to what we've done. All we've done is picked a spot within the middle of the development where the developer would like to do this type product and actually kind of create a little mini neighborhood, if you will, within it. They'll have the same rights to the amenity areas as everybody else, but it just has its own separate entrance into it. It'll be a small little neighborhood of this type, smaller units. The homes, a representative of the developers here has told me that the price point on these, the per square foot cost of these homes are going to be higher than the homes that are in the development. Smaller, but the per square foot cost is going to be up. So this is not a cheaper product that we're putting in. This is meant to be a nice product put into the development. And I believe, in answer to Ms. Bryant's question, we submitted a landscape plan. If I'm not mistaken, there are trees. Now, I won't say that it's a solid barrier, but there are trees put in those buffer areas. So I've hoped that what has transpired since we were before you before is the fact that we have moved it to another location. I don't remember there being tremendous issues from you folks. Now, you may have changed your mind, but the issue seemed to have been the location relative to the existing. So same product, just moved north, so that we've gotten away from that particular issue. But I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have
Any
any.
questions for the developer while he's here? If not, thank you. I'll go ahead and,
Chairman, I failed to mention, I just want to mention that we're, but open space, the total open space is 28.8% for this PUD, and then the total green space is 14.65, just to make sure we all know that, which is 28.8% and 17%. Just want to make sure, since we've had a discussion about open space and green space before, I'm going to point that out.
thank you. Nobody's listed to speak to this, but
I did receive these letters.
But if anybody would like to go ahead and come up now, this is a public hearing, so now's your chance. If not, I will go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting over to the commissioners.
Hold up just a minute, please. Looks like you still got some of them, Steve.
I'm sorry?
I said, looks like you still got some of them that,
Commissioners, I will say that most of the calls I received once the signs and the letters went back out was they wanted to know, did they move it? And was it presented to the commission like it was presented to the residents, that it would be moved away from existing homes? And the answer is yes.
Not only did we move it, but we returned the area where we were proposing it before back to exactly the way it was before. So we didn't change anything next to the original plan that was before them. So, just so that's clear too. In fact, one other thing. That bottom red line you see on your map pointing over to that green space, at one point there was a detention pond in there. We were fortunate enough to get rid of a detention pond, so that sure makes a nice large green area there that's not imposed with the detention. I always like to throw a plus in, I need them.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
case numbers ZC 18.060 Battle Village, PUD amendment. I move that we recommend to the city council to approve these changes.
I have a motion to recommend approval to the city council. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second with Ralph. Any further discussion?
I just have one question, Steve. All these little common area strips in there, is that going to be maintained by a property owners association? And it'll be like sidewalks or pedestrian pathways through there? Is that the goal, or what is the goal there?
There'll be lawn areas that'll be maintained, mowed, and, it's not
Okay.
shrubbery, it'll be clean. There's landscaping plan, leaving the trees as they are, just the trees.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Second to last item on the agenda, request, I'm correct now, AT&T for an 115211 review to install 1,269 linear feet of underground cable. The project will run along Magnolia Avenue, North Church Street, and to the Fairhope parking garage.
Thank you. I think you covered a lot of it. This particular site, it's a standard utility review, but the concern on this one is that they're going through that parking lot area, and it's under the authority of the parking authority and single tax. And one thing that we're waiting on is the documentation. They did show some approval documentation via email, but we're looking for the right of entry documents. That's been requested by the Public Works Director. And the building official asked for a little extra attention with regards to pre-construction conference, that one be held prior to construction and that written notice be provided in advance to the affected business owners along that area, and they requested a schedule also. And that's pretty much it. And we need a verification of the depth of bore.
Okay. Anybody here, this is not a public hearing, but does anybody have any comments about this, or is there anybody here from AT&T? All right, if not,
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Because my office is right there fronting on Magnolia, and there's some really beautiful trees on that street, and it is a boring, but I just want to confirm that we're doing what will be, how those trees will be protected. They're definitely heritage trees.
The good news is that the directional board is the least intrusive to the root mass. I mean, and
Yeah.
they have the ability to, if they hit a major root or meet some resistance, they can jog and kind of literally snake their way through the root mass. I cannot think of an example of a root ball that was bored through that caused the tree to demise. So as opposed to trenching and cutting roots and all that, this is preferred methodology, and they do it all throughout the city, and I can't think of a single tree that's been
Better way.
affected.
Okay, and are we talking, is it going underneath the sidewalk, or are we going down the street like they have another?
It's all off of the edge of pavement underneath the sidewalk, so.
Okay. Yeah, well, the Magnolia is already dead where it's coming across the street, but it's just towards that corner where you've got the really significant
That was
oaks.
because of the construction that went on there that killed that one. I mean, that was
It's been.
bulldozer damage.
It was nice to see it put out of its misery finally after those years. Okay, that was my only concern, because that's,
And I have to go back to double check, but I think the diameter of the actual conduit is 1.25 inches. That means the bore is less than 2 inches.
that makes me feel better in and of
Yeah.
itself, but, okay. Well, it's passing by the one at the old Papa's Pizza as well. It's just making its way around some really significant oaks.
Anything further? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Motion to accept case UR 1805. Are we on that one?
Yes.
I don't know. 1805 AT&T.
I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation to approve for UR 1805. Do I have a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, last item on the agenda, public hearing to consider the request of the City of Fairhope Planning and Zoning Department to accept Resolution 2017-03, a proposed amendment to our low-impact development requirements.
Yeah, I don't know.
Chairman, Commissioners, and I'll thank Ms. Emily Boyette for pointing out something that we did not discuss during the work session about this item. You'll notice the resolution is 2017-03, because that is the resolution under which we initiated this process, and we've deferred it from several meetings to allow both staff and the commission sufficient time to study and examine this issue. But what we have before you would be adoption of an amendment to the subdivision regulations regarding the low-impact development requirements. And I'll ask Emily if she'll forward to the next slide for us, please. And so, Chairman, Commissioners, if you will look at the bottom of page 64 in your packet, in the area of the subdivision regulations, and we also have it on screen in color, if that's easier to see, and as well as the benefit for those watching. This will modify the section involving low-impact development techniques, which is portion of the stormwater portion of the subdivision regulations. And what I'll do here is just quickly read through you the primary amendment to this section of the subdivision regulations, which is the bottom of page 64. And you'll notice everything, if you're looking at a black and white copy, if it's a strike-through, that is wording that we wish to remove from the subdivision regulations. The underline is new text. You'll notice here the use of 10 LID techniques. 10 is removed. It's struck from the regulation. And then you'll notice at the bottom of the page the new text, the additional text to that paragraph, which says, the intent of the requirements for the use of LID techniques is that the development shall implement as many LID techniques as practical and appropriate for the development, Plans and calculations shall show the efficacy of each LID technique and include a quantitative analysis. And if you'll flip to the next page for me, and if Emily will move to the next slide for us, please. Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, at the top of the next page, performance. The plan shall clearly identify each LID technique on a grading and drainage plan with appropriate details and cross-references to the drainage calculations. Chairman, Commissioners, you'll notice that we've basically been presenting that to the Commission on previous cases where we had a robust drainage situation. Now, the next page I'd like for you to look at, if you will flip to page 69. Now, at the bottom, in the bottom lower portion of page 69, and Emily's put it on the screen for us as well, this is completely brand-new text added to the regulation. There are 15 LID techniques listed in this section. It gives a brief narrative on each one. In the paragraphs preceding this section, there's also a chart explaining the total suspended solids removal of various LID techniques. Our request, staff's request of the Commission, is to add item 16, which states additional information regarding LID techniques is included in the document Planning for Stormwater, Developing a Low-Impact Solution, which is a publication of the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service, and is available for download from their website. This provides some additional narrative and some additional guidance, not only on the LID techniques already contemplated by the regulation, as well as offers some additional alternative LID techniques, probably the most notable and the most significant being a green roof. Offers those and gives guidance on the various calculations on how to design it, as well as how to build it, sample drawings, etc. So that is the desire of staff, to have this amendment reflected in, have these amendments reflected in here. There are some additional very minor edits throughout the document. One of the minor ones is something that staff has worked on, is to change the inspection interval from 3 to 5 years, because 3 years is a bit cumbersome for the amount of retention, detention out there in various subdivisions and developments. 5 years we think will be much more manageable. And there's some very minor text edits in there where we clarified the names of staff and how staff is currently identified in the subdivision regulations. And so with that, Chairman, Commissioners, I'd be happy to answer questions. And also Mr. Richard Johnson may have some additional comments as well.
All right, thank you very much, Buford. Any questions? If not, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We have talked about this a good bit and talked about making some improvements, because a lot of people are trying to hang their hat on, the numbers rather than what actually is accomplished through the LID techniques.
I have a quick question, and I apologize for being late to the work session. My question is that if this additional resource offers options like green roofs that may be appropriate for more dense urban environments, do we still need the option for a waiver?
We don't need the waivers anymore, because from now on it's purely quantity.
Well, it's still in here. We still have if a project due to the natural characteristics of the property cannot successfully implement any LID techniques.
That needs to be taken out.
I would love to not deal with waivers.
What's that?
From a waiver standpoint, we don't know what we've made encounter in the future. I don't know so you're saying we should take that out?
My thought is that our goal would be to get out of the waiver business and have a regulation that would apply, even if it's underground, it could apply in any environment where these are required.
We could always.
I understand the comment. I understand Rebecca's concern. I think it's always good to have a release valve in the case of some extraordinary circumstance. That would be used very often, and that would be up to the commission to choose if it was ever used. I understand wanting to get rid of it. I think that for the future, who knows what may happen, I would probably suggest we leave it in there, just as a safety valve for some extraordinary circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah, there's certainly something that we can't possibly fathom at this time. There could certainly be an extraordinary circumstance where you would need that, and have that availability for a project.
But I will tell you, as it's currently written, I can't foresee a case where it would not be necessary. But just for
Can you put a price tag on a waiver?
I don't think so.
All right.
Well, then, I guess the follow-up concern would be that, to make sure that we really clearly communicate to the community that this is an extreme circumstance waiver, you know, above and beyond, and
I couldn't imagine us ever giving a waiver, but I agree that we should have it in there, but I couldn't
I agree
see
with
how
that.
somebody could never figure out an LID technique.
And Chairman, Commissioners, we've had we've had situations where Mr. Johnson assisted me in reviewing applications where we discovered where applicants had actually designed and placed LID techniques into their projects and it just simply didn't occur to them to identify an LID technique. We've had a situation where we have found level spreaders, where we have found wet ponds that they just simply did not illuminate an LID technique. So I think that this will certainly minimize the number of waivers requested of the commission.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I'm Wade Burcham. Y'all don't get many applauses, but I'm here to give you one on this. This is very good that you're doing this sort of thing. I'm a civil engineer locally here, and I do a lot of restoration projects where development goes up on upstream, and I have to clean it up downstream, which is my business, and you're kind of cutting into my business, so we won't talk about that. But this is good, and I just randomly happened to come here tonight and just read through these, and so maybe you get 2 claps tonight because I'm clapping for you guys. I wish people knew from my point of view how much sense this makes. It's 75% of the time it makes sense just from a capital expenditure for the developments, and you can forget the bees and bunnies and all that stuff, but just being a good neighbor is what this is about, and I applaud y'all for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, anything further? If not, I will close the public hearing, and this does not go to city council. This is approved right here. So does somebody want to make a motion to approve the resolution as written?
I move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Anything else? If not,
Meeting is on Thursday.
Next Thursday at the same time.
In the Dropbox, we will look for another method to get information out to you, and we will email each of you when we have that method.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye.
Aye.